Leading Age Minnesota. Leading change, changing lives.
Hello, my name is Julie Apold, and I am the Vice President of Quality and Performance Excellence at Leading Age Minnesota. What I want to share with you today is a program called ICAN, and the focus of ICAN is to drive quality and innovation from the front lines of care. So when we used to think about quality improvement, this is what we thought of. So we'd identify an issue, and then we'd bring it to a group of supervisors and managers, and they would get together and they would come up with solutions. And then they would bring those solutions to the direct care staff and say, this is what we're going to implement. And that old concept of quality improvement just did not work that well. And what ICAN is designed to do is to really take a new approach to quality improvement, where we drive quality from the front lines of care. So the people that are closest to the care are the ones that are identifying the issues to be addressed, and they're the ones that are coming up with the solutions. So in ICAN, the direct care staff are the ones that redesign their work to be more efficient and more effective so they can spend more time doing the things that they want to do, which is spending time with their residents, with their families, with their tenants in their environment. And what we find is that a lot of times people don't do quality improvement or think about it because we're so busy doing our jobs on a day-to-day basis. And what we find though is if we take that time to step back and look at how can we make our work more efficient and more effective and more successful, we actually spend and save time in the long run because we're doing our work in a better way. So what does ICAN look like? So in ICAN, teams participate in a training like this video training that you're watching, and then they apply those strategies to different improvement opportunities that they identify. And then once they put those solutions in place, they track progress with those solutions and the impact those solutions are making and make changes as needed to make those solutions even stronger. So who's involved in ICAN? And the teams that work on projects will really vary depending on the type of projects that you select. So if you select a dietary project, for example, of course, you'd want dietary staff involved. Or if you identify a maintenance issue, you'd want to have maintenance staff involved. So the team that you put together really varies depending on the type of project that you select. But you want to have an ICAN lead or co-leads that really make sure that that project and those solutions are moving forward. And so the role of that ICAN lead is to really champion that work on the floor and get everyone engaged and then make sure that that work is moving forward. So there's 5 different steps to an ICAN project, and we're going to go through each of those steps. So the first one is to identify the problem that you want to solve. And then the second step is to select the specific problem within that area to focus on, and then brainstorm solutions around that identifying problem, and then select one of those solutions to work on, and then test to see if that solution is effective or not. So let's talk through how you could plan a project using the ICAN approach. So you start with an ICAN project plan, and this is a good way to organize your project so everyone knows what the project is and what their role is within that project. And we're going to talk through each of these components. So the first step, as I mentioned, is to identify the problem to be solved. And a good way to do that is a real simple exercise called the magic wand exercise, where you say if you had a magic wand and could make a change within your department that could be put in place fairly easily to make the people you care for happier and to make your job easier, you would. And then your team fills in the blank and comes up with ideas. And then once you have kind of that broad idea of what you want to work on, the next step is to drill a little bit deeper. So within that problem area you identified, what is the very specific part of that problem that you could impact? And this is a really important step because I see people trying to take on projects that are too big. So for example, a lot of times they'll say, we want to work on communication and improving communication. Well, that's like boiling the ocean. So you need to drill down a little bit to say, what is it about communication? Can we take a piece of that and build a project around that and have success? And then we can take on that next project and then that next project to get where we need to go. One example of that is one of the teams that worked on an ICAN project. They identified as their problem through their magic wand exercise that the staff are really frustrated with a long-term problem that they were trying to deal with of resident cares taking too long. So that's the problem that they identified to focus on. But that's a big, big problem. So what is it within that problem of resident cares that they really wanted to take on and they felt would make a difference? So this is an example. So the resident grooming supplies were disorganized. So this is what that group that had that broader issue around resident cares. So they identified that it really was the grooming supplies that were the issue because they were very disorganized. And that was causing staff to constantly seek out, where is this product, where is this product? And they didn't have those products readily available. And that was contributing to those cares taking too long. So they felt this was a specific project that they could take on. So in the ICANN project plan then, this is the first piece where it says, what is the problem you want to address? So what you would include here is what is the problem and why is that a problem? Why is this something that you want to address? So for example, many residents do not have their grooming supplies readily available for their cares. And why is this a problem? This can lead to cares being missed and can impact the health of our residents and increase the time needed by staff to provide cares. So this is the first step in the process. So the next step then, once you've identified that specific problem you want to address, now it's time for the fun part, which is to identify those solutions that could impact that problem. So a good way to do this is through brainstorming. And a lot of times what you see people do when they're looking to solutions, they'll bring people into a room, sit around a table, and they'll just start throwing out solutions and come up with, this is what we want to do. And what that does is that it really focuses in too quickly and narrows the solutions that you are putting forward as possibilities. Or if you take a step back and first do an initial activity where you bring people together that are part of that process and impact that process, but they're each coming up with their own ideas. So a good way to do that and a real easy way to do that is for everyone to have a set of sticky notes, and you just give people 5 to 7 minutes and say, come up with as many solutions as you can, put one solution on each of those sticky notes, and have everyone do that quietly and by themselves, because what that does, it brings out everyone's ideas, it allows people to be more innovative, and it really brings out those people that may be quieter and sit back and brings out their ideas too, and not just the ideas of people that are more comfortable in speaking up. So once you do that and you generate as many ideas as possible, and you make sure to tell people that there are no dumb ideas. So just come up with any idea that comes to your mind, don't overthink it. And then once you do that, you put those up on a whiteboard or a big piece of paper, and then you have 1 to 2 people that go over those different ideas and they group them into different themes, because you're going to see that they cluster together in a couple of key ideas. And then the next step is to give everyone a dot, so a sticky dot, and I usually give people 3 of them. And then you can just tell them, vote on your ideas or the solutions that are meaningful to you, where you think will have an impact. And they could put all of their dots on one idea. They can have 1 dot on each idea. And so it's a way for you to get a sense from the group, what are the solutions that they think are going to be most effective. And then the last step in identifying solutions is to look at what we call the matrix of change. And what this matrix does, it gives you a chance to step back and say, with all the solutions, let's say we've identified 3 to 5 solutions, which of those solutions are going to have a lower impact? We don't think they're going to have as much success in really resolving our problem or the area we've identified. And which of those solutions do we think are going to have a higher impact and really make a difference? And then what are those solutions that are easier to implement and don't need as many resources? And then what are those solutions that are more difficult to implement and may take more time and more resources to put in place? And the ideal solutions are those that are in the upper right-hand quadrant there. Those are solutions that are easier to implement, but we feel like they're going to have a high impact. So those are the golden solutions and the ones that you hope that you come up with. But you also want to make sure that you're looking at those solutions that may take more resources and may be a little more difficult to implement, but we feel like they're really going to make a difference. And what we want to stay away from are those, of course, that are more difficult to implement, but we really don't feel like they're going to have much of an impact. A lot of times you'll see people going to those solutions that are easier to implement, such as training, but in the long run, they really don't have a high impact. So you really want to look at your solutions, the resources that you have available, and the impact you think they're going to make on addressing your area that you've identified. So at this point then, in your project plan, you would put in there, this is our proposed solutions. So what is the proposed solution and who is the target population? So in our example here, we will create grooming kits for our residents to store all of their supplies and make them organized and easy to use. And then we will test the solution with residents in 5B and then spread to the rest of the floors. And this is an important step because a lot of times what people do is they feel like if we come up with a solution, we have to implement it house-wide. And sometimes it's better to take it a little bit slower and say, we're going to start it here and we're going to test it and make sure that it's strong and a good solution before we would take it house-wide. So that may be something to consider when you're putting your projects together. In addition, in your project plan, you want to make sure that you identify who are the team members that are going to be part of this project. So what is their name, their titles, and then what are their project roles? So for example, Betty Smith is going to be our project lead, and Betty's going to be responsible for organizing meetings, keeping our project on track, and providing monthly update at our leadership meetings. Sam Jones is another team member who's going to be our data lead, and Sam is going to collect data and create and share graphs. So who are those people that are going to be part of this project and what is their role in the project? The other piece that's really important when you put together a project plan is to identify what are the tasks that need to be done, who's responsible for those tasks, and what are those deadlines for those tasks to be completed. So determine the tasks and the roles to be assigned, and then communicate clear expectation of what team members need to do, and establish clear and reasonable timelines, and then ask for feedback. A lot of times I've seen people develop projects and then they'll bring it out to a different group and say, this is what we want you to do. And that usually doesn't work so well. So you want to make sure that you involve the people that are going to be part of that solution and be involved in implementing that solution and give them an opportunity to provide input into that solution. So now that we've identified a solution, we need to make sure that the solutions that we're putting in place are effective. They may look really great on paper, but are they really going to be successful when we implement them in practice? And how we do that is we evaluate those solutions and we measure their impact. So there's different types of measures and ways that you can track and evaluate your solutions or your project. And these are the two kind of key measurement types. So one is a process measure. And what a process measure, it measures the changes that you're making to your process or to your system. So in our grooming kit example, we'd be measuring the % of residents that do have their grooming kits in place. So that's a process measure. An outcome measure, it monitors if the change you put in place or the system change that you've made is having the desired impact. So in our grooming kit example, the reason that we're putting those grooming kits in place may be that we want to decrease the number of dental issues that we have because our oral cares aren't being done on a consistent basis. So for measuring outcome for that project, we might measure the % of residents that have 0 new dental health issues. So that would be an outcome measure. So you may pick to do a process measure or an outcome measure, or it may make sense to do both of those types of measurements. And then what you want to do is to track that progress over time. And an easy way to do that is to calculate a rate. And really what a rate is just looking at the number of times you got what you're trying to do right, and then over the number of opportunities you had to get it right. So an example of this is that in your grooming kit project, what we're looking at, the number at the top is the number of residents that had that grooming kit in place. And then the number at the bottom is the number of total residents that could have had a grooming kit put in place. And so in this example, 60 residents had a grooming kit in place that month, but we had 100 residents overall that could have had a grooming kit put in place. So 60 over 100 is your percentage that you would be tracking. And for this project, they chose to collect data on a monthly basis, and their project was 4 months long. And they set a goal that we want to have at least 80% of our residents with a grooming kit in place. So that's what we're trying to achieve with this project. So this is just an example of what that could look like if you're tracking that over time. So in the first month, this team had 60 kits in place, and they had 100 residents overall in that unit. And so they had 60%, they achieved 60% for that month. And then they made good progress in the second month, and now 70% or 70 residents had a grooming kit in place. And so that at 70% and 80 and then 90. And then I'm a very visual person, and it's an easy way to share your data and let others see the progress that you're making. So you could put that into a simple graph and show that we're really making progress over time. So you just plot each of those on a simple graph to say, here's your first month, second month, third month, fourth month, and then you can see if you're going in the right direction. So now that we have our project in place, we're working on that solution, we're tracking if we're making progress or not. We're at our last step of the process, which is called a PDSA cycle. And what PDSA means, this is a term that's used quite often in quality improvement, and it's really very simple when you think about it. So the P is the plan. So what is the project plan that we put together to implement our solution? And the do is simply implementing that solution. And then studying is using whatever you determine to be your measurement process to evaluate your solution to see if you're going in the right direction. And then act is based on what you're seeing in that data. What are we going to do next? So in the example of the grooming kits, you could see that the data is going in the right direction. So we're likely going to continue with that process because it's effective. If you're seeing that your data is not going in the right direction, you might want to step back and reevaluate and say, do we need to make a change in our solution to make it even more effective? And you may also find, I've been involved in projects that just didn't go where you thought they were going to go. And you may want to just stop that project plan and step back and look at a different solution that may be more effective and get you where you need to go. So this is an example of a PDSA cycle from the grooming kits. What the team that was working on this project found is that the first buckets that they bought for the project were really not the right size and shape to really work well for the staff and for the residents. So they actually went through a couple different cycles of different kits that they bought and put in place. And then finally, by the end of the project, they found a really good solution that worked well. So you can ask for feedback, you can collect data, however you're going to do that to evaluate to see if you need to make changes. So I just want to share some examples of some of the projects that the ICANN teams have taken on. So this is actually the example from the grooming kit project, and you can see the big difference with the before and after. That before it was really difficult to find their different supplies for cares, and after it was much more organized and more accessible to staff and to residents. And this is a really powerful way, collecting data and tracking that is a good way to see if you're making progress and to share that information with others. But taking pictures before you start your project and as you move through your project is another really effective way to share your story and show your successes with your projects. This is another organizational project that someone took on, and you could see on the before picture that the supplies are very disorganized. It doesn't look very tidy. They're not really accessible. You have to kind of dig through and see what's there. And then you could see in the after picture that it's much more organized and easy to see what you have. And this is a nice project too for your supplies to make sure that you always have the things on hand that you need, because you can easily see what you have and what you need. Another way to track your progress and to share the story and the success of your projects is through stories. And that's a really powerful way to share the impact that your project has. And this is a success story from the grooming kit project where the resident gave feedback that their caddy is easy to carry. I put my caddy on my walker and go to the spa before everything would fall off. It's great. I'm so happy. So that's a really nice way too to get feedback on your solution and then to share those stories with others. This is another project, an ICANN project. So this team identified an issue around their first aid kits. And what they found is when they needed to go to the first aid kit, they would find that it was very disorganized, so they couldn't find the products that they needed. And they also didn't always have them available because nobody was monitoring to make sure that the first aid kit was fully stocked. So they didn't have the supplies they needed when they needed to use them. And so they went out and they purchased some new first aid kit bags. And then they organized their supplies within those first aid kits. And then they made sure that they designated someone that was responsible for monitoring that on a regular basis to make sure that it was fully stocked. This is another project that a team took on. And this was a really interesting project where the staff was really concerned because this is a picture of a mechanical lift. And in the front, you can see the wheels that were on that mechanical lift. And what they found is that those small wheels, when they're trying to push a resident in that mechanical lift, it was really difficult to get over transitions, for example, in the floor. And it was hard for the staff to push that. So there were injuries related to try to push that mechanical lift with the small wheels. And of course, there was a concern of safety for the resident and tipping over and other issues. So they identified that as a project that they could take on to begin replacing those small wheels with larger wheels that were much safer and easier to maneuver. And they actually took on this project. They didn't have funding for it, but they went to the auxiliary and different groups to get funding for this project. And they replaced all their mechanical lifts with larger wheels that were much more safe. So just some examples of the type of projects that you could take on. And just to conclude here, I love this quote by Helen Keller that says, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And just because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do." And that's really the goal of ICAN, is that quality improvement and safety is everyone's job, and everyone can have an impact on the quality within their organization for themselves, for their teams, and for the people that they serve. So I look forward to your projects. Thank you very much.